G'day, today down the shed, changing out a fuel pump on the td42.
Tools for the job, some basic spanners, screwdrivers, pliers, some sockets. Some things to think about will be some stumpy spanners. If you can get ratchet, that's awesome. Pipe spanner, a 41mm socket to turn over the engine, a H puller, and I'll let you know what size bolts I use there, 8mm from memory, torque wrench, and also little electric ratchet. If you don't have that, doesn't matter. Some consumables, brake clean WD-40, and just a touch of grease. Okay.
What I'm going to start off by doing is pulling out the radiator, pulling off the air intake, taking the battery out, sliding the power steering pump assembly to the side so we've got access to get in there.
With the radiator out of the way, I also pulled the engine cooling fan off just to give us a bit more room. And I've also realised I didn't have the washer bottle there, so your reservoir should be able to cable tie out of the way. Now I've also pulled off the cover for the fuel pump timing gear, and I've lined up the engine to top dead centre. There's a casting on the timing cover there, casting mark. Now you've got to line that up with your harmonic balancer, and it's normally the second mark for top dead center. I'll show you now. So normally on your harmonic balancer, the first mark I've painted there in blue is to set up your fuel pump, and the second one's for top dead center. So that's what I've lined it up for at the moment. So with the engine at top dead center, on the drive sprocket for the fuel pump, hopefully you can see the double Z's there. On the drive gear that drives the fuel pump, there's just a single Z, and they have to match up. I'll try and put a little photo in there after for you. Moving on, disconnect your throttle cable, the fuel shutoff solenoid, and then we'll disconnect fuel lines. So now with the flexible fuel lines all disconnected, your supply, which goes down here, your return, and the return from the rail. So just push them out the way. Now we're ready to move on to the main steel lines. It's where you want a pipe spanner, 17mm or 11/16 to crack them, so you get a good surface area on them. If you can, get a spanner to hold the injector as you crack them, and be cautious because you can damage this return line. Crack the fuel lines on the back of the pump. Go along, undo all them. Then there's going to be a couple of retaining brackets. Oh, can't see that one. I'll show you in a minute. And again, you can't always get that pipe spanner on. So a stumpy 17mm or 7/16 also helps. The retaining bracket I was talking about, it's just located up the back here. It's bolted up. You also might find it easier to get these fuel lines off and back on by just loosening off these injector line clamps. I wouldn't go taking them completely off, but if you have to, you have to. Now I'm going to remove the drive gear off the front of the fuel pump by taking the 19mm nut off and fitting a H-puller tool to the front. Also for myself, I've just put a white mark where the Z is, where the two Zs are, just as a bit of a reference from where I'm standing, and one up here from where the bolt hole lines up. Just as you put it back together, you've got some sort of idea of where you're going. Then you can double check to make sure you've got it in place once you get it into place. Ensuring that your H-puller is square to the drive gear, go ahead and undo it. Being aware that there's a keyway just in here that may drop, so just be aware of that. There's that keyway that I was talking about. Just don't go dropping that. That wouldn't be fun. The next stage I'm up to is removing the mounting nuts. You need a 12mm spanner to get to those. There's 3 of them, 2 at the top, 1 at the bottom. Then there's a bolt and a bracket just underneath. And on the block here, there's 2 bolts that hold that bracket in place. Pull them out, and we should be able to pull that pump assembly out in one. Now just on the back of the timing cover here, hopefully you can see there's a line that goes across. And on the side of the fuel pump there, I think there's a faint mark. That's basically to time your pump. All I'm going to do is set it up in the center for now. There we have it. Old pump out. There's that back bracket that goes onto the block that I was talking about, and the bolt underneath. I just pulled that out as one. And there's that slight mark that I was talking about, which is basically the center of that hole. So depending on your scenario, I'm just fitting a second-hand fuel pump that I know it was running. Just going to swap over brackets, bits and pieces, and reinstall. Putting the keyway back into place, I've just applied a bit of grease to it, slide it back in, and hopefully that holds it in place for you for assembly. Now if you do have to change over any fuel piping or fuel lines, change out those copper washers that go underneath as well. I think switched over and ready to go. Make sure you give the face where the pump bolts back onto a good clean, new gasket if needed. Hopefully you can see that line I was talking about, just down here. So all I'm going to do is line the pump up, center of that, and then have to go from there. Reinstall your pump. Might need a hand, but otherwise you can jiggle it into place. Just hold those fuel lines back. With the pump, I've just loosely bolted it into place and lined it up the best I can. Focus. Center of that hole to that line for now. Then I'll put the drive gear on. We'll go from there. Hoping you can see what I've done here. It's hard to video here, but lining up those Z marks on the timing gear, all I've done is I've just put the gear on just at the start of the taper where the Z's line up and pushed it back until I felt the keyway lock in. I've then wriggled the fuel pump slightly just to get the keyway to slide on. Now that gear's all lined up. Now let's just say that your keyway doesn't line up with the gear. What I've done before, and that's why I've got a reference point here to the Z, is I've just fitted the fuel pump drive gear onto the keyway and rotated the engine around, and you'll see I've got a little white mark here where the double Z's are, and I've just lined that up to that. Then I'd pull the drive gear back off, so I know that keyway is lined up, turn the engine back to make sure that's lined up, the Z, then you should be right of getting the drive gear back on. I hope you understand that. Righto. Once you have that all lined up and you're happy, confident, put your spring washer and retaining nut on. Tighten up to spec, which is 70 Newton meters. Now I'm happy with all that. I've just tightened up all the mounting nuts and bolts. If you just want to double check it, turn the engine over a couple of times, make sure it all lines up. Make sure you remove your ratchet, because that won't be cool when you start it up. Now next stage I'm up to is reconnecting up all the fuel lines. Start with the steel lines that you removed last, which I'll have to double check. With a bit of playing around, I found putting cylinder 1, 2 and 3 on first to the pump and tightening them up. Then I loosely fitted them to the injectors, and with a bit of stuffing around with these 3 combinations of spanners, you're able to tighten them up into position. If you do have any dramas, just undo these clamps just to loosen them up, to get them into place, and go from there. With all the steel lines back on, tightened up, I've just put that bolt back in, and I remembered that's a water gallery through here, so just put some thread sealant on that. Now I'm going to refit all the flexible hosing, put the cover back on, and you can get away with just using some gasket goo around here. And again, to refit that, where's my arrow? It goes up that way. 2 long bolts go at the top, and they go through the cover. Tighten that up. And yeah, keep chipping away, put everything else back in. Now with everything back in place, prime up your fuel filter, pump it up. You can crack your return line, but I'm not going to worry about that for now. I've cracked all the injectors off, ready to go. Pull off my safety glove, turn it over until we've got fuel coming out the injectors. Then I'll tighten them all back up and we should be good to go. Hopefully you could see that. Got fuel coming out from the injector line. I'm just going to nip up all these injector lines now, and she should fire up. Well, you may see I've got a piece of wood, and that's just in case it started to run away. You can put that over the air intake, suffocates it, and it will shut off. So the reason why I changed this fuel pump out was because it just ran on. I had that prepared and shut it off. So never ever try and use your hand, because it will suck harder than your Dyson. Righto. Just a little tip. Dirty thumbs up. Thanks for watching. I hope this helps you out if you're going to tackle this job yourself. I'd probably advise grabbing a tune after, just to make sure you got your fuel delivery set up right. For this old girl, she should be right. Throw us a like if it does help you out. And I'm no guru on these, but if there's any other tips we can give others, throw it in the comments, and we'll go from there. Righto, take it easy. Also, I forgot to mention, the kids and I are building this old Patrol back up. So if you'd like to follow what we're doing with it, it's called the Debuild Rebuild. So we're taking it from being a lifted Patrol, big wheels, etc., with a blown up engine, and we've put it back to this, back to standard, so the rebuild of it. Hopefully get it over the pits, grandpa spec it, and then maybe do some mods from there. I'll put the link in the description if you are interested in following. Righto, again, take it easy.